Hey everybody, it's October 15th, 2017, and this is your episode 118 of Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosmi, and with me as usual are Laurel Black.
Hi.
And Ben Charles.
Hi everybody.
And Tracy Wiggins is here.
Hello.
Back on the show, subbing in for Megan Arns, who I believe is doing her lecture recital on her Pierre Norgard I Ching topic that she talked to us a little bit about last week. So good luck, Megan. We hope you're good out there. Yeah, I think I did mispronounce my own name, Ben. Yeah, thanks. That's true.
Cangelosmi. Edit this out. Go.
So yeah, how are you guys doing? This episode is coming out right before Pasic. So actually, Laurel had a really cool idea saying that of all the big lists of artists at Pasic, we should each give our top 2 recommendation, which is really hard and quite impossible, and actually made me think a whole lot to try to narrow it down to 2 things I would recommend for everyone. Does anybody have a quick 2 they want to name?
Yeah, I can. I decided to not go with the obvious biggies, I suppose, and look towards some of the maybe individual things of people I didn't know, but I thought it looked really cool. So my 2 things are Focus Day Concert A together. Now this is the 9 a.m. concert on Thursday morning. Simply because some of our previous podcast guests, Transient Canvas, that's the bass clarinet marimba duo, they're performing a piece, and Lee Hinkle is playing a piece by Stuart Saunders Smith called The Authors, which he commissioned, and I bought the score to it many months ago, and it's on my list of things to do. But like many of Stuart's pieces, you have to speak, but you also have to sing, and I know that Lee is classically trained as a vocalist in addition to his percussion training. So I'm stoked to see that. And then the other thing is Bill Solik's Theory and Practice for the Actor Percussionist, which is Friday at 1 p.m. And you guys have heard me rant about people who try to do theatrical pieces and do them really badly. So I'm interested to see what Bill has to say about this. So those are my top 2. And I also have to shameless plug the health and wellness sessions, which are always really early in the morning, which is kind of a drag because 7:30 comes early, Pasic week. But they've got some really cool sessions planned this year. And if you're a runner, you can get up and do the 6:30 fun run, which I've done many years in a row. And I tried to make one of the 3 mornings. And that's usually about all I can do realistically. But yeah, that's mine. Who's next?
It's pretty amazing, those early morning runs.
It's so early, but sometimes there'll be a group of, 10 to 20 people.
Yeah, it's a good group.
Which morning are you running, Laurel?
Maybe Friday.
I'll try and
I tend to do it on Friday.
I'll try and do it with you. No promises.
Okay.
He's not going to be there. He's not even going to be at Pasic. Are you going to Pasic, Ben, or what?
I am going to Pasic. I applied for the faculty development grant to go to Pasic.
Oh, nice.
So hopefully I get that. If not, I'll still go.
Do you have a top 2?
Yes, my top 2 are when I first started getting into percussion when I was like in middle school. I don't know if you guys remember the old Pentium processor commercials that had Blue Man Group, but that was like the coolest thing in the world to me. And Blue Man Group is performing at Pasic for the first time ever this year, so I am super excited about that. I was just pulling up the times. Let's see here, and it looks like it's the Blue Man Group Chicago cast, I think it is, and it is on the 9th, which I believe is Thursday. Is that Thursday or Friday? Thursday at 2:30 p.m. in room 105. And then the other session that I wanted to plug is actually on the other end of the spectrum, the Bach Middle School of the Arts, directed by Eric Rucker. They are the IPEC junior high / middle school winner. It's their showcase concert. And that is on, I think it's Friday, the 10th at 2 o'clock in the Wabash Ballroom. Bach Middle School was right by Florida Atlantic University where I used to teach. And it's always shocking to me when I hear very young students playing at such a high level as these students. So these students, to get in this performing arts middle school, have to audition in. So most of them, before they've even entered middle school, have already started taking lessons. And by the time they're in 8th grade, they're playing pieces like Stubernick every bit as good as any university. It's insane. So I'm really looking forward to Eric Recker's Bach Middle School students.
Wow, great. I'm glad you knew that. I had no idea about them. That's cool. Yeah. Tracy, do you have two?
Yeah, I think one of mine is going to be Michigan State, their percussion ensemble performance. One, because John Weber, who I went to school with, is one of the percussion teachers up there. But also, the last time they played at Pasic, I still think is one of the best concerts that I've seen at a Pasic. It just blew me away. Their performance of Poe by Xenakis, they did it entirely from memory, and it was clean and musical and exciting, and I was just blown away by the whole performance.
Tracy,
so I'm looking forward to see what they do again.
Do you recall, did they use a click track for that?
I believe they did.
Okay, gotcha.
But they also, I mean, Michigan State has a phenomenal drum line also, and so a lot of the guys that play in that line were in the group that played it. So their ensemble timing skills were just kind of off the hook for that. And then the other one is the Shane Shanahan and Todd Roach performance.
Oh, yeah.
For people that don't know who Shane Shanahan is, he's one of the percussionists that he studied with Glenn Velez, and he's a Hart School alum, so he went to the same school that I did. A phenomenal hand drum player and everything, as is Todd. And anything that Shane does, I'm pretty much just blown away by. And so I think that this is going to be a pretty great duo performance by them also.
I saw Shane and Larna Lewis do an improv together. So Larna Lewis, snarky puppy drummer.
Yeah.
And it was just fantastic.
Yeah, and Shane's doing a lot of new. I want to see what he does with it too, because he does a lot of stuff lately with using like a loop station. So he'll do like the overtone singing, and he'll play some grooves, and he'll loop it all, and then he solos over the top of it. And so I'm always interested to see what he's up to.
Yeah. He when we shared our gig together, that same event that I saw him perform at, he expressed interest in the podcast. I need to follow up, because we definitely got to have him on.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I've had him in a couple of times as a guest artist, and he's not kidding at all, one of the nicest people on the entire planet.
I would say so, yeah.
And so that's also what makes him so amazing to have out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I had a hard time, of course, like everyone, picking two, but not so much because, anything in particular stood out to me, but because it depends on kind of where you are in your musical life, I feel like. And yeah, trying to just narrow it down to two ended up turning into this big philosophical conversation with myself, because on one hand, I see, okay, you got Stephen Schick doing things. So if you've never seen Stephen Schick, you've got to see Stephen Schick. If you've never seen Bob Becker do things, well, you got to see Bob Becker. If you've never seen Steve Smith, you've got to see Steve Smith. So I don't know. It's really, really tough to actually pick two, but I did. And I'll first say that go to Laurel's thing. So Laurel Black and Mike Cerrito, professional development thing. They're going to show their research on the big surveys they've been doing for, I don't know, over a year, right, Laurel?
Yeah.
Yeah, well over a year. So I don't know, that is definitely one of those things that isn't going to come around again. I mean, I don't think, or if it does, it's going to be years later. So that doesn't really count because Laura's my wife. I can't really say that. So I guess I would also say, on the side of culmination of research coming in, Rebecca Kite is going to give a lecture presentation on a bunch of stuff that she's been researching for a long time. And then last thing, I would say Marimba for sure. So Sharon Leventhal and our teacher Nancy Zeltzman are going to do a focus day performance piece. So that's really cool. And I don't know that they play at Pasic much, right?
They don't.
No.
I guess they have kind of rekindled their collaboration, but they didn't play together for many years there for a while.
Yeah.
It's only been in the last year or two, I think, that they started playing together again. So
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, they would certainly be on my list. They're so good, both of them.
Well, this is a pretty big event for them to play together again, too, I think.
Yeah, it's a reunion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, guys, our guest today is a household name in marimba performance. Her name appears over and over as a guest artist all over the world as she performs, adjudicates clinics, gives master classes, and in fact, I myself had the pleasure of performing for her in a master class when I was a student. This year was her 8th hosting of her International Marimba Academy, and in 1999 she was honored by the Polish Percussive Arts Society as the Ambassadress of Polish Percussion Art, which is so cool. That's the coolest credit or title I think I've ever heard. So tons more to say about her, many awards and great critical acclaim, but let's just go ahead and welcome Katarzyna Mycka. How are you?
Hello, hi. Nice to hear you.
Yeah, sure. Nice to hear you too. So are you going to Pasic this year?
No, I just been to Basic last year, so I think it's actually cool to have some, time in between and then see some new things every few years.
Yeah, sure. And I think we all went to your concert last year. I know, I think I sat with Ben and Laurel. Tracy, you were probably there, right?
I think Tracy was busy same time, no?
No, we had, our band was playing at BOA, so I didn't get to actually make it over to it, but I did see her at Pasic, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think maybe first time we met at Pasic, Tracy. Do you remember when was the first time?
It was one of them, yeah. I mean, I had you in at Sanford.
Exactly.
But I think that was after we had met at Pasic to start with.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Well, we've got a great question, which, speaking of just your reputation as a marimbist and your fame as a marimbist, Fernando Meza, a good friend of the podcast and friend of all of ours, he wrote a really great question, as he always does. And he says to you, you've been a pioneer in the field of marimba as a solo and chamber artist and have traveled around the world projecting the instrument and its merits as a viable concertizing instrument. What is your take on how the instrument is received nowadays by major music presenters, meaning professional orchestras and or chamber festivals, etc.?
During, I would speak maybe about 20 years because this is how I more or less count my, let's call it, professional career. And also this year is the 20 years anniversary of the recording of my first CD, Marimba Spiritual. So as I'm talking about these 2 decades, and definitely I think not only my work, but of all the colleagues and everybody who is dedicated to marimba, we made a really good job. So mostly, if you speak about someone, people already know what is a marimba, and this is a very big step. 20 years ago, starting to explain stuff, I always needed to start with, like a xylophone, a little bit bigger, but, more notes and stuff. And now the conversation starts from the different level, and this is actually a very cool thing.
So I guess, let's see, continuing in that same vein, so yeah, sure, marimba is much more commonly known now than it was 20 years ago. And you mentioned your CD. I have to tell you, and I wanted to tell everyone about your CDs, and that your latest CD is called Marimba Present. And before that is Marimba Classica, then J.S. Bach Marimba Concertos, then Marimba Sculpture, Marimba Concerto, Marimba Dance, and the first one you mentioned, which is a really important and special CD to me, of course, Marimba Spiritual. This was probably the first, in fact, no, I'm quite sure this was the first all-solo marimba CD I had. I maybe also had a Steve Reich CD. I also had an Evelyn Glennie CD, but this was the first total solo marimba CD I had, and I spun it to death. I mean, I played it so much. I had every inch of that CD memorized, and my teacher, Dennis Griffin, he eventually just gave it to me because I was borrowing it so much and listening to it so much.
That's funny.
Oh yeah. So I was going to ask you, all the way back to that first CD, what was it like getting that first CD out? Was your career kind of pretty far underway at that time, or did it really take the release of that first CD to launch your career?
I don't see my CD as any big or important step in the career. I think for every musician, the first CD is something like a name card. I mean, something that you just can present yourself with. And I totally didn't expect that it's going to be that popular. And also the company who risked at that time, I was not really known. That was actually 95, 96, I won these marimba competitions, but marimba doesn't have the same range as the piano has, for example, does, or violin. So, it was actually maybe a big thing in our circles, to be honest, but in comparing just in the music life of Germany or of any other country, it didn't really make any difference. So, the CD, I thought I need to do something just to introduce myself, and was super excited. And thinking back, as I got the CD, I thought my heart would totally jump out of my breast. Just totally excited, overexcited, I think. And then, after a few months, I don't know, maybe there was just a space or empty place or spot for this kind of disc, and as you say, there were many CDs sold, and actually I think everybody was pretty much surprised. And even last days I was looking for something and just going back over some rankings these years as my CD was done, and it definitely for many years was actually the number one at least in Germany of this selling. So it was kind of surprising having all these big names also, and as you mentioned, Evelyn Glennie, Keiko Aves CDs also in the marimba range, which I thought, wow, these are the discs that I was actually very much looking to have and to listen to.
Of all the CDs that you've made, do you have a favorite one?
I always have a favorite one, and it always is the last one that I just did. So right now I'm very happy and proud of the last one, of the one with concerti, and happy very much that it could be realized. But actually, honestly speaking, it's always the last one, and I think, wow, this is a great one. And then after a while you're looking for what is the next project.
I think for me, I had the experience of seeing Kaśka perform at UNT when I was a student there. I think it was 2008. And the way Brian Zader describes Kaśka's performances is that she just plays warhorse piece after warhorse piece after warhorse piece from memory and nails all of them. And I just remember my jaw was just on the floor because I had seen her name for so long, but I never knew how to pronounce her name, so I never actually listened to her recordings, as lame as that sounds. And I just remember after she played Ilyáš, there was just roaring applause for what felt like 10 minutes. I mean, it was just an unbelievable performance. And then I went to Pasic the next year, and I saw her CD, and I bought it, and I was so happy to find that basically the entire program she had played at UNT was on that CD. And I had the same experience as Casey of just playing that CD and just wearing it out.
That's funny. I don't remember that concert actually at all, but that was probably the time as I recorded the Klassika CD. So that's why I think Ilyáš was, that time I was playing that pretty much.
Yeah, it was. I remember you played Ilyáš, you played the Dave Friedman piece, Between Dawn and Dusk, and the Keiko Abe Kazakh Lullaby, and I mean several others, but those are the three in particular I can recall.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. But you know what I thought always recording, sometimes you have repertoire that is kind of good for your hands and feels comfortable, and then you decide to record that, but then you find out, okay, it's not enough time on the CD, what can we record more? Then I was recording some new pieces, and after played them a while, I don't know, a year, maybe two, then I thought, actually, I don't like the interpretation for that time. It was kind of too fresh. So basically, I think it's kind of cool to have a piece for a while in your hands and then record. But yeah, it was not always possible. Or sometimes I just miscalculated the time or the amount of repertoire that I had.
So you've traveled all over the place. You've seen lots of students play. You've seen lots of recitals. You've encountered a lot of new repertoire and pieces. So when you're deciding what pieces you want to learn, What are kind of some of the traits that you find in common amongst those compositions?
Doesn't need to be anything in common, but I think the piece needs to be interesting in some way. Usually that's something that attracts my attention, for maybe because the mood is, because I'm ready to receive the piece. But also sometimes if there's a composer, I'll just mention one name at this time, but I don't want to say, I don't want to qualify composers that I was working with. But if Anna Ignatovic is writing something, I am pretty much saying yes before I open the score, and I know I'll be working on that. And this is actually the case. The piece that I performs the half of that at Last Basic, the postludium I'm working on right now, and it is still a very exciting and very difficult piece for me to manage. But I could say her music really means a lot to me, and it's actually worthy to work in that. On the other case, sometimes, like we mentioned Elias before, I was not planning on play that piece because it became, I don't know when I've heard it first time, I think 98, maybe 99, something like that. And I found out that there are people who are playing that have same problems with it, have some same difficulties. And I really didn't plan on playing that piece, but after some master classes, I thought I need to play it to know how to solve the problem, and that was actually sometimes the thing that I was picking up a piece because I thought I need to have it in my hands, to find out why is that particular place or particular phrase so difficult to do, and that helps a lot, definitely.
Well, I have sort of two questions wrapped up into one. You mentioned the name Anna Ignatovic, who I know you've performed a lot of her pieces, and a couple of her pieces have made it to the United States, but definitely I know there are more than just Passacaglia and Toccata that are out there, including the trumpet marimba double concerto. So could you tell us about your working relationship with Anna Ignatovic? And then also, I know recently you recorded Passacaglia with Svet, is that correct?
Yeah.
And could you tell us about that recording?
Yeah, the recording was supposed to go out actually a few weeks ago, but so these hurricanes and all the diseases that were coming to Miami, I think Svet is planning to bring it out in November. Anyway, Anna, because it's Toccata and Passacaglia, as I mentioned, became so popular, actually people think she might have more, but she doesn't have that many marimba pieces. She's a really independent composer, independent in the way she's not really connected to only one instrument. So she wrote works for piano, for choir, for organ, for trumpet, for ensembles, for percussion and tape, and all possible combinations. So marimba is just, as kind of small part in her oeuvre. So actually for the solo works, serious works, she has only 2 pieces. And she wrote some preludes for young musicians already, I think, 91 or 92, and those pieces were actually somewhere in her home. She found out maybe it's going to be fine to publish them. I think they're pretty neat, pretty nice. So I think actually United States is pretty much up to date with her repertoire because there's not that much available now.
She has, and I think, doesn't she also have a marimba duo for 2 4 1/3 marimbas?
Exactly. That was a piece written in 92. It was republished or remade a little bit, and now it's published. I think since 2 years there's the official version existing. Yeah, actually, the funny thing was I was looking for many years for a Polish piece that really is kind of close to my sensitivity, or let's say my soul, and didn't find a work that will really attract my attention very much. And by coincidence, I've heard Toccata once, played by Anna's husband, and after that we started working together more intense, and I thought every note that she's writing is so important and so beautiful, and it was also important for me to make the connection with a publishing company in Norway, with Norsk Musikforlag in Oslo, who also took her pieces and publish them and make them more popular. And what is important for myself and always have been, when I started to perform a piece, the piece needed to be published. That was my very first rule, because I think it's not fair, you know, to have the handwritten version from a composer and then just copy it forever. I think this is also a matter of respect against our composers who are still alive, most of them, which is wonderful. So we should support them, and also publishing companies. So I really cherish very much, and I'm happy that we could make this nice collaboration with this Norwegian publishing company and Anna getting more involved and interested in marimba. And so last year, also for my request, she made a duo that she wrote for harpsichord and organ, which is now existing in a version for marimba and organ. It's a beautiful piece. And a few other things, also a marimba trio piece, which was performed at Pasic a few years ago. So I hope there's more stuff coming.
I love what you said, that every note she writes matters, because that's exactly what I said when I heard the winner. Oh, geez, I forget how many years ago, but I was judging the Sant'Angelo Festival, and our winner played the toccata.
Oh,
and
great.
That was my first time having a good listen of it, as in it was played really well, my attention was there, and I had a score. And I remember thinking the same thing came over me, and of course, as a writer myself, and thinking, like, what is making this so good? Why is this so impactful right now? And it's exactly what you said. Every note just matters. You know, it matters when there's a lot, it matters when there's a few, and each one seems to be very, very deliberate and placed. And yeah, it's just a great example of good composing, I think.
Yes, but you know, having you, Casey, this is a cool thing, because I appreciate also very much what you wrote. And I remember, as we met first time, maybe 10 years ago or something, in Texas, in Houston, I think, and you gave me those characters that you just wrote. And I thought these pieces are also phenomenal. And that's why I was also, you know, you remember there was one character, I think a few years ago, as a set piece in a competition in Bamberg, marimba competition, in a group. And I thought, what a great example, you know, because the piece is not known very much, and there's a lot of space to create something. But the difference between you and Anna, if I may say that, is that your pieces are lying good on marimba, and Anna's pieces sometimes are really crazy. It's really crazy difficult. She doesn't play marimba herself, and there are often, you know, ways that you need to discover how to do that. But I think this is also the way that brings our instrument to the next level, actually, you know, because we are learning from that, and we're learning how to do stuff. So sometimes it's also interesting, you know, to have the other side. If a composer has really not, she knows how to write, and I have a feeling that her some parts of her pieces are very hard on the edge of the possible. Being possible, and sometimes maybe I can say that, especially regarding to the concerto, as I started working on the piece, I called her and said, you know what, this is so difficult. I mean, I don't know how to manage that. It's so hard. And she goes like, I know. And that was her comment.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks so much for even mentioning my name alongside hers in any capacity. That's very kind. I appreciate that.
Well, you know what? I much appreciate your stuff, and many people playing that. And I think that's also the music that leaves the performer space to perform, to really, you know, this is something important, because I think as a composer, that's also what Anna says. When the piece is done, when the piece is written, then it's gone. And you really don't have much influence on that. It's just like a child that you're sending into the world, and you love it, you know, you appreciate it, but it's going. It's just going somewhere.
What'd you have there, Laurel? I think I interrupted you.
Oh, no, you didn't. I was just, you know, you guys said something about the repertoire and pushing the instrument forward. And I had a question for you, Kaśka, on a subject that I've spoken with Emmanuel Sejourné about a few times, and that's in terms of the marimba itself and its size and the bar geometry, wondering if the companies started to kind of agree and everybody got to making them about the same size, do you think that would help the instrument more to grow, just like piano grew so much once there was a standard size? What do you think about that?
Right now, to be honest, I don't have a clear opinion. Like starting 20 years ago and playing competitions and not having the instrument. Actually, I bought my first Marimba One 21 years ago, but not having the instrument first and playing every competition, almost every concert on another instrument. I thought it's not serious. It's just not a serious way of playing. And I was talking to Ron Samuels. I was talking to Yasuki Semba that time. That was the person from Yamaha, responsible actually for the creation of the instrument 5100. And they started to talk about unifying the size of bars. But I think there are very strong personalities also involved in dealing. For example, like Keiko Abe, and she says that the Yamaha 6000 is the best way of how marimba should be, and her opinion is of course so strong and so important that I don't think any one of us will say no, you're not right, it should be more narrow, I don't know, or wider or something. And I remember Masters marimbas going down, I don't know, maybe correct me, until E or D, maybe low D, but not until the C, and they were so wide and you could just really hardly get a quinta, a fifth. So definitely, I think it will be very helpful for performers to have a unification, especially when you are forced to play on an instrument that is not your own one and you don't know well. But on the other hand, right now, I think if we are serious about what we do, if we take care, we want to take care of articulation, what is very important for me, and the colors, and also use some certain mallets that we have in our mind that will help or match some piece. I think we should actually use only our instrument as far as possible, or really stick with one brand if the brand is stable, has stable quality, because I can't imagine any violin player playing on the other violin a concerto, because it's just the same size and 4 strings, this kind of stuff. So I think although the instrument's so big and not easy to transport, I think if we're serious, especially in Europe, I mean everything is more or less in a driving distance. It's a different issue in the United States, but I think if you stick on with one model, with one instrument, that might be okay. So we probably don't need this unification that much, because every instrument now, I think, if you think about different brands of marimba, has a very different art of speaking, of reaction. Bars are really reacting differently on strokes. So I don't think the unifying the size will be the biggest issue.
Could you tell us on this note about your relationship with Marimba One and Ron Samuels?
Yeah, I could. I don't know how to start. And we had a big, I think actually Ron had a big trouble to get me first time to United States. And 97 for my first Pasic, it was such a trouble with my Polish passport. I don't know why all the, there were all possible problems to not let me go into United States. But Ron somehow managed that with a lawyer. I saw him first time at that Pasic, and I thought this famous person making this wonderful marimbas is just so humbled and so modest and so pure. And so I thought I just like this way of making the business, just caring for details, caring for the quality very much, and besides of that, being of course a businessman, because he needs to run everything. So our relation is, we don't have a contract, if you're interested in that. Our relation is just based on trust and I think on respect. And this is a very important basic, I think, for a good relation. We working together since my first Marimba One, as I mentioned, since 96. And I'm pretty happy because this is the instrument that matches my needs very much. And I think our collaboration is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I think, my teacher who I talked about gave me the Marimba Spiritual CD. We got a Marimba One at that school because of you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice to hear. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think everybody has some favorites and everybody has some imagination. But just the very first time that I've heard Marimba One instrument, that was 93. Someone just brought it from United States to Germany. And that was actually a very important week of my life, pretty essential. In masterclass with Peter Sadlo, my former teacher. I've heard the instrument and I thought, this is the thing. This is the sound. This is something that I really need to have one day when I have enough money.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite marimba ever is Gibson. You know, Gibson marimba?
I don't know that.
Come on, guys. They make guitars. That was a joke.
Oh, okay.
Okay, not a good joke.
Lame.
No,
That's pretty lame.
I'm so focused on what you're saying regarding
The internet. Yeah, I shouldn't joke right now. Well, we will give you a quick break from chatting, though, and get to Ben's historical person. Every week we have Ben tell us some type of historical performer or composer or company or something. And he has one that very much relates to you this week. So what do you got, Ben?
Yes, so today I want to talk about Anders Koppel, who is a famous composer. And we'll talk about his compositions as they relate to percussion in a little bit, but just a little background information about Mr. Koppel. He was born in 1947 in Copenhagen, Denmark. He's from a family of musicians, particularly his father was a composer and a pianist. He began studying piano at the age of 4 with his father. At the age of 7, he began playing the recorder, and by the age of 14, he made his concert debut at the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art. He sang in the Copenhagen Royal Chamber Group growing up. His father exposed him to the music of many of the European greats, including Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Stravinsky, and Bartók. Then, I think maybe in his teenage years, he also became interested in rock music. And in 1966, he bought a Hammond organ, and he formed a rock band with one of the most amazing rock band names ever. It was Savage Rose with his brother.
That's rad.
Right? And so he recorded and toured internationally with this group for 7 years before leaving to pursue a solo career. He recorded a couple of albums and became interested in world music, and he started a trio that had sort of world music and jazz influences called Bazaar that was active from 1976 all the way up to 2012. He also musically, obviously, is a composer. He's composed more music for 8 ballets, more than 150 movies, 50 theatrical plays, 3 musicals, and more than 90 works for classical ensembles and 20 concerti. There's a great little Vimeo composer portrait of him. If you go to musicsalesclassical.com and you look up his page on there, you can find his complete bio, list of all of his works, and this great little, like I said, sort of composer's portrait. He is, I can't think of anyone else that has written 4 full-length marimba concerti, all of which were recorded by Mariana Bednarska, who I think is a Kashka student, and Kashka has also recorded his first concerto on her Marimba Concerto album. He also has 2 duo concerti, at least one of which was written for the Safri duo, a percussion concerto, an allophone concerto, and he also, one of my favorite is it's called Concerto for Trash and Orchestra, which is sort of junk percussion instruments. He also has many non-concerto works, including 4 marimba solos, which I know Brian Zader plays his 9 Peanuts a lot, and 7 chamber works featuring marimba and percussion. In particular, I wanted to mention his first marimba concerto was written for the International Percussion Competition Luxembourg in 1995, and Kashka was the winner of that competition and performed this piece, obviously, and has recorded it, and I'm assuming has probably worked with Mr. Koppel on more than one occasion. So that's Anders Koppel.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Many nice informations you've got together.
How did he do?
Yeah. Great. Anders, I was very happy to meet him a few times. He was also on some, at least 2 performances of his concerto. one in Denmark, one I think in Germany. And I was fortunate to have him at my Marimba Academy 2013 as a composer in residence in Luxembourg. Also in Luxembourg we did it. So we performed almost all of his works that were possible to make in this chamber music ensembles. And what is actually a very cool piece that he didn't mention so far with the name is the toccata, which was very popular, played by Safri and also composed for Safri for marimba and vibraphone. I just played that last August after a few years not playing that and really enjoyed.
So the toccata that Kaśka mentioned is interesting because it was originally a concerto. It was written as a concerto in 1990 for vibraphone, marimba, and orchestra. And then I lost the date. I think it's 1994 he created a version for just marimba and vibraphone duo. And then I found out also in 2004 he made a version for marimba and piano that I think is the concerto version, but the vibraphone and orchestra parts are all in the piano, so it's just marimba plus piano.
Exactly, a little bit more. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever performed the concerto version of it? That piece doesn't seem to make the rounds as much.
No, I was never interested in that. Somehow I really stick into this version of the duo, and I'm very much, you know what I don't like this connection for marimba and piano. I think marimba, for my ears, marimba is tuned a little bit differently than piano is. It's well-tempered also, but differently well-tempered, and I think it's biting. The sound is not really matching well. So I think this connection marimba vibraphone is perfect, vibraphone piano perfect, but marimba and piano, somehow it doesn't work for my ears. So I'm trying to avoid that, actually.
There was we had a composer on that said the same thing. I can't remember who it was. Mm-hmm. I remember Laurel was talking about her duo and
Hebel.
Oh, Hebel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. He did say that. Yeah.
Everybody can probably, maybe other marimbas are tuned also a little bit different, but I think the low octave just doesn't work with piano. And Ron Simons is always explaining that, and I always keep forgetting if which of the harmonics is the strongest one in the low bars. But definitely this is something that I don't really feel like really cool. And I think if you play with piano and the pianist has always the role of accompanying you and just making the orchestral reduction, so it's also not really satisfying. And for me that's also not a duo because it's always accompanist. So I think it's actually the cool thing is if you have a duo which is kind of like equilibrium, like evenly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah, it seems like as soon as the piano part is very thick and pianistic, they suddenly don't match as well.
Yeah, that's the problem. Mm-hmm. And also in the marimba, I think if you have careful composers, careful in the way that they listen first and understand the instrument well, they mostly do not write small intervals in the low marimba octave. I think if you want to have a clear harmony in this instrument, I think the intervals needs to be matched very carefully. So I think, not smaller than fifth. Because if you plan a different thing, if you plan clusters, of course, if you plan some kind of dissonancy or conflicts, musical conflicts, everything is cool. And I'm fine with anything. But being just conscious about the sound, which is also in the marimba, when you play something and don't damp it directly, or you don't have time to damp it, or it's maybe not on the side of your body where you could react on that. It is usually the sound that stays for a while, and sometimes overlapping is critical.
Mm-hmm. I met Gunther Schuller. He passed away recently, but one of the things he said in our very short conversation was about the marimba needs a damper pedal.
That's actually what Pedro Carneiro tried to work out with Majestic, but I don't think they went. Huh?
They made it.
Yeah, I know. I had one in Luxembourg, and we played a Spanish groove of my vinyl, and we set my marimba in 10 minutes or even shorter, and we tried to set the other one, and we spent, I think, half an hour to fix everything, but still the pedal was rattling pretty much. But maybe that was just the beginning, first try. But
I think that is the only one they've made. I think.
Yeah, maybe.
I did get a chance to play it once. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe now that's better. I haven't seen any, and so I don't know how it works now. But I remember Pedro was pretty much into it, and I think the idea itself is pretty cool, because yeah, that will solve a lot of problems. But it just at that time, the prototype maybe didn't work out so well.
I also wonder about, because you hear composers say stuff like that, like, I just don't like this combination of instruments, and I wonder if marimba being so young, because I think about a symphony orchestra, think of how many different ranges of the different instruments they clash, or how many different combinations there are. And it seems like it's on the talent of the composer, in my mind, to know, yeah, like every time a harmony in two voices doesn't work, that means there's something unique that they can do. You know what I mean? And we've had so many years in practice of picking that out in orchestra music. And in my mind, it has to happen for the marimba too, because there probably is some really unique things that marimba will do with piano specifically that it won't do anywhere else. I wonder.
Yeah, I think you're very right. Yeah.
On an interesting note related to Anders Koppel, his fourth marimba concerto, which was from 2005, was written for the 250th birthday celebration of Mozart. And people asked him, why did you write a marimba concerto to celebrate Mozart? Because Mozart didn't obviously write anything for the marimba. And he said he felt like the marimba at this current stage is very much in its state of development as the piano was in Mozart's time. So he wrote in the style of Mozart for marimba for that occasion.
Yeah.
So we're in the classical era. We're mid-classical. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, that's what I always mention if I'm talking about marimba repertoire. If I have a classes or masterclass somewhere, I'm always mentioning Pius Cheng, that he is just writing now the romanticism, which we don't have. You know,
right.
Just simple as it is, no romantic period. So I think, yeah, this is the reality. But on the other hand, now the time that we're living in is so fast and so packed. So I'm afraid that maybe also composers do not really have time or take time to learn about the instrument. And marimba is not as simple as xylophone is. And marimba is a very complex instrument. But I have a feeling in a time of, everything becoming so quick, people just don't have time sometimes for the simplicity of how it is. And I think if you just take your time and listen, and if you have careful ears, like many composers do have, it will be difficult to match marimba with others. And just marimba itself or alone will never have a chance to get really big, to get a really big partner or on the musical stage in general.
Tracy, what do you have there?
Yeah, this is going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but I remember when I first met you and stuff like that, you were playing for the production of Miss Saigon. Mm-hmm. You were playing in the. So my question is A, are you still doing any of that kind of playing for the musicals and stuff like that?
No, I stopped playing musicals 2007.
Okay.
And I was doing that for 13 years. Mm-hmm.
And how did? Because that's obviously quite a bit different than your solo marimba career and stuff like that. So what tools did you get from doing that you've taken into how did that influence your marimba playing?
Hard to say. I don't know how it influenced, because I was actually maybe playing the show for 3 hours, but practicing marimba for 8. So I think rather maybe my marimba playing was influencing the way that I played the shows. But yeah, maybe it's a joke. Anyway, I think that was something that you learn playing with the others, and it doesn't matter if it's a musical or a symphonic concert. In this way, you just learn watching each other, being on time. Matching, mostly you play the musical with some in-ear. So you need to focus on everything else happening and just controlling some things. And playing musical production like en suite, that means like every evening, same thing. You need to be very stable. This is what is requested. And this is actually also something that at some point let me make the decision that I don't want to do it anymore, because also it was difficult to manage the whole planning. I had a little more concerts planned ahead, and and musical productions were changing a little too often for me here. And then there's always, if there's a premiere or something, then you can't take your time off. So I just made the decision that I need to stop.
When it comes to chamber music playing, do you have a favorite non-percussion instrument that you like collaborating with over others?
I like very much string instruments, and not only in the setting of the string orchestra, but also as a string quartet or singles, like a cello or maybe a violin. And they're really beautiful pieces written for that duo combination. Nancy Zelsman was such a pioneer in this matter, and commissioned many works for marimba and violin. And my second favorite combination is probably the human voice. So playing with a choir or with also single voices, single parts.
And you play it's a Ne Rosario work with Keiko Abe wrote the lyrics for it, is that correct?
Yes, I did once. I premiered that.
Could you tell us about that piece?
I think Ne actually wrote the music and Keiko Abe wrote the lyrics for that. They just made a co-production for something. That was a festival in Mexico when I premiered that. But actually, I played the piece only twice, so I can't tell much about that. And if it's the idea, to get continued.
I'd love to take it back to, we were talking about composers a few minutes ago, and I'm always curious when we get a guest with your amount of knowledge and experience, and who's been doing this professionally for, like you said, your CD is 20 years old now. What is your feeling about the current solo marimba repertoire? You mentioned Pius Chang and how, and I totally agree. As much as I tease Pius and he teases me back, I perfectly agree. I think Pius is awesome, and I think his music's so good, and I totally agree. He's filling a gap that I'm so happy is getting filled, because like most of us, I just think romantic music is fantastic. But yeah, back to the question, how do you feel the current state of solo repertoire is? Do you think there's good things, bad things, the overall trend? What are you seeing?
I think it's both, actually. I think it's very important to write a little bit the direct back. That means we also need some classic repertoire, since marimba's history is so short. So I personally appreciate every piece that is written for marimba, and I think the time will show us which pieces will stay and which actually will grow and make this basic, let's say, this 50 or maybe 100 years of solid repertoire that any other instrument that is older has already. And I think there are great things happening, and also maybe not that great things happened. And the main thing is, I think, the responsibility that performers, because there are more composers now who are interested in marimba, and they just need people, to prolong their idea, to bring it to the audience. So I'm always trying to encourage young players to not only catch the old stuff that we have, let's call it old, but also really to try to play pieces written by their colleagues, written by young composers, because you never know, they could be a pearl, they could be a diamond, and if you just don't play that, it will maybe never shine. And that was also everything that I was doing on my time. There's composers whose names you just didn't know before, and then if I thought, no, these people are great, and I want to dedicate my time and my work for them also to make their music popular, and this is also recording their stuff. Was one of those goals, paying attention that those pieces will be published, really. So if people like them, whenever you perform in a festival or somewhere and people like them, they can get this music. And that was always a very important thing for me. And actually, looking back, I never reserved even for me any time. And I think it's more than fair that music is going. So coming back to your question, quality, I think the quality is like it was also before. There were better, maybe less good pieces. But in general, I think the quality is maybe also growing because the knowledge about the marimba is just bigger.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Do you think, speaking of, you mentioned there just need to be a lot of more good players available. Do you think studying percussion and studying marimba need to continue to separate? Because I think we all know that they're separating more and more and becoming more specialized, because we see, which is probably partly thanks to performers like yourself, it's becoming more of a specialty, and people are realizing, like, wow, the marimba rep is getting really hard and really complicated, and it's going to take more focus and time on that to keep up. Do you think that's a good thing, or do you think we're going to lose some things along the way if we don't keep our core, our drummer at heart?
You know what? I a little bit disagree with the middle of your sentence, because of course pieces are getting more complex, but also technique is getting better. And also now we have teachers. We have the first or maybe even the second generation of teachers who know a lot more about marimbas than I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, because then we had just fewer exceptions of people who were very dedicated and focusing on marimba. And right now there are many places where teachers like you, Casey, for example, who just know how to solve problems, right now. So you don't need to look for that, because you already have some big, big knowledge about the instrument and the technique. And I remember myself, I made 3 tries to play Merlin. I wanted to play that pretty much as it came out, because I thought the piece is great, but then I gave up. It was just simply too difficult, and, made another try. And then I thought, okay, this is my last chance, 97. I remember that, for the competition in Munich. And I thought, okay, if not now, I'll never play that piece. And then I performed it also at Pasic, being super afraid that I will make a really bad job, because probably everybody in States is playing that piece. But I think now, looking back, 97, Merlin was a really big thing, really hard stuff. And right now, if you see, sometimes kids in high school playing Merlin. So I think this technical abilities and knowledge just moved a little bit. So we are playing, or people now are playing harder stuff quicker than it was, the case a few years ago. So personally, I'm not a big friend of really separating totally or really dividing the education. I think every one of us should have a very solid basic with percussion. And especially, I think what is pretty cool is dividing now the starting time in bachelor's and master's, which is, I think, now working almost everywhere in Europe. And I would rather recommend, making bachelor's really seriously in all directions and all the covering possibly a lot of percussion themes and issues. And then for masters, maybe, focus on one thing that you particularly like the most, and you think this is your special talent that you have in this direction. But only starting, like only simply the marimba or only timpani or, I don't know, only snare drum will get some chances for the very for the realistic life, because you don't know actually what is gonna help you to survive and to be happy, to realize yourself as a musician. So I think cutting this option at the beginning of our education is risky.
Yeah, sure. Just a quick fun little background question. If marimba is obviously your forte instrument, what is your mezzo forte percussion instrument? I'm not aware.
Before I played marimba, I played a lot of timpani, and I played in many orchestras in Poland during my studying time, and this was actually something that I really loved. I think I have a pretty fables for the low instruments, for timpani and for double bass, for cello. But actually, my very favorite instrument also is a trumpet. I don't play trumpet myself, but that was also the idea, as Anna Ignatowicz, before she wrote the Marimba Concerto for me, asked me, is there any other instrument that I like? Because she thinks marimba and strings is just a little bit limited, and she would need another color just to have some drama in the piece, to bring some drama. So trumpet will be, of none of the percussion, will be my favorite instrument. But what I also enjoy very much playing is the snare drum.
Ben, I think you have something kind of shifting us away from this. Is that right?
Yes, well, actually, a lot of this made me think of a question that I asked Claudia Santangelo a while back, which is, Kashka, as you travel the world and do clinics, do you see any, I guess you could say, fundamental differences between American marimba players and European marimba players? And what do you find are the highlights and the things that you need improvement from both American and European, particularly student marimba players?
To be honest, I don't do that many clinics. I'm rather the musician who is playing more concerts, performing more. And I think this doing clinics is more the specialty for United States or for American continent. But observing students maybe on both sides, as you say, I have a feeling that the chamber music playing and understanding connections in Europe are a little stronger. I'm not quite sure, but also speaking with Brian Zader a few years ago, Brian said it's a pretty a typical thing in America is the competition. So you play, you compete with your steel band, you compete with your marching band against other schools, and you compete in marimba competition, and you take a part in many events this way. So I think this is bringing you in some kind of a position that you want to be a champion. But I think making music in general is more of making a network and finding partners who can really bring you to a different level of understanding, and always playing, if this is a duo or maybe some small chamber group, is a matter of trust. It's a very important thing, matter of respect, and also opening yourself to the other person who will have different ideas. And this is something that is, I think, symbiotic and bringing us to a different level, because even if you are the greatest soloist ever, but don't have the interaction with other musicians, there's some kind of limit that puts us in a pretty small spot, to be honest, even if you're the greatest technician or greatest virtuoso. So this is something I think important to think about, and also in America, just maybe concentrate on building bridges very much, and not only being yourself the champion. That's a little bit of my feeling, and that's a little bit of background that I could observe last years.
Yeah, what do you got, Tracy?
Yeah, I was just wondering, we've talked a lot about history of the marimba and your background and stuff like that. I was curious if there was somewhere where you were hoping to see repertoire or instrument design or something like that go from here. Kind of what do you see as the future of all of this?
Well, I wish very much that marimba was still growing the way that it is growing, having a very solid basic to be promoted as a concert instrument. Because still, as we said at the beginning, there is a difference. There's definitely a big difference between what I've learned last 20 years. But still, there are too many, even concert organizers, even if the question is they know what marimba is, but they say, oh, we just had marimba 2 years ago, so it's not going to be scheduled next 3 years or something. And they do piano recitals like 10 in the year. So I think there's still a way of us to go, and also for young players to spend more time on really making their musical soul more rich and being more, maybe more sophisticated in the way that we're working and doing, and also get interests not only in music maybe, because everything that you feel in your life, every feeling, every emotion, and every knowledge in some other region is making your performance more rich, definitely more interesting, because is a language. This is how I understand that. So I think for us it's also something to enrich that more, and not only focus on technique, what maybe sometimes young players forget, and they think they need to do some exercises and that will make them excellent. But I think being creative very much, this is the thing, and maybe looking for new paths, looking for new ways, because the world is big and there's I think place for everyone, and there are many uncovered ways to be gone.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we're about nearing the end here, but I thought I'd just ask you real quick, is there something coming up that we could plug for you on the show, or that you could tell us about, or maybe just what your next project is?
Well, right now I'm personally practicing on this solo piece by Anna Ignatovic, but I'm working also on the next edition of my Marimba Academy, which is going to be in 2 years in Ljubljana, Slovenia. Will be wonderful if we could just mention that. So I think it's also a nice place to go to be there. So maybe some students or some people from America also will be brave enough to go over to Europe and join us. And yeah, all the other things, just working on everything.
Yeah, and the website for that is what? I had it up actually just a minute ago.
Well, I don't have the Ljubljana yet scheduled. We are still working on details, and then I will be able to make the advertisement clearly.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm,
Well, marimbasolo.com is
exactly.
Koshka's site, everybody. So yeah, please just keep an eye on that. And man, Koshka, it's so fun to have you, and you're always so fun to talk to, and it's really nice that you'll talk to me at all. So I really appreciate that.
Okay, so don't say that. As we met first time, I thought this guy is very special.
Oh, cool.
And I think that's what I told you pretty much, and you impressed me very much by the first pieces that you gave me at that time, and that's why I was keeping always. I never played your music myself. This is a shame, actually. Yet, let's say, but I was working on that with others, and yeah, I will still, keep my eye on that very much. But I think now you are pretty much superstar. Don't need, this. Your music doesn't need to be set up. To get popular. So, but
she has played Pais's music though.
just one.
I'm editing it out.
Yeah, but anyway, I think good stuff, good quality stuff will come up anyway. But it's actually always nice, to have people who are dedicated to help and to keep up. But anyway, I'm very happy to see what happens with your music and with you. So, and how great are the projects that you're doing moving forward.
Well, thanks so much. And man, this podcast is a big long-term project, that's for sure.
I think so.
Thanks so much for being on it. And everyone listening, just a reminder that you find us on iTunes, and you can find us on Blogspot and YouTube, and you should be able to find us on any of your regular podcatchers. Just make sure to search at Percussion with the @ symbol, as in shift2 at as in email, and then also AT spelled out, and you'll probably be sure to find it. I probably don't say that on the show enough. In fact, I think that's probably the first time I've ever said it in 100 and almost 20 episodes. So man, thanks again, Koshka, and Laurel, Ben, Tracy, thanks so much, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for your time. It was great to talk to you guys.
And you.
Have a good time. Bye-bye.